Welcome to GBCI Canada's video series, New COVID Guidance for Your LEED O&M Project. At the end of January, GBCI Canada led an interactive discussion about the challenges that project teams have faced due to COVID-19 and how the latest guidance provides a pathway to certification for all projects. This video will address guidance specific to each performance category. See the other video in the series for high-level tips for navigating your project certification. Project teams have been experiencing many challenges related to reduced occupancy and changes in operations since the pandemic began in March 2020. The main factor driving the pandemic's impact on LEED O&M projects is reduced occupancy, since scores in ARC use this metric to calculate all the performance scores and response rates for surveys. Together, the two videos in this series will provide solutions for these common challenges that your project might be facing. Over the past year, the guidance has been evolving to suit the changing pandemic situation. There are two key documents that have been released which provide a path to certification for all projects. The first document is the high-level guidance that provides allowances, and the second document is step-by-step ARC submittal instructions. The guidance boils down to two main pathways for projects impacted by COVID-19. Projects can use option 1 to generate a performance score based on data that predates the COVID-19 pandemic and is after January 1st, 2018. Option 2 includes outlined pathways to account for reduced occupancy during COVID-19. There is detailed guidance for each performance category. It's important to note that the project can use a combination of option 1 and option 2, depending on the data that the project team has available. Just remember to keep the reporting period for energy and water the same. The main challenges for transportation performance are related to conducting the transportation survey and achieving the minimum response rate. Project teams are used to being able to do in-person surveys in the lobby, which isn't an option when the building isn't regularly occupied and most occupants are working remotely. Going back to the two options available, option 1 can be followed if you have data from a previous transportation survey. Just make sure that the survey was done after January 1st, 2018, and is within 2 years of the reporting period you'll be using for water and energy. If you don't have data from a previous survey, follow option 2 to conduct the transportation survey during reduced occupancy. Once you indicate in ARC that your project was impacted by COVID-19, the minimum response rate will be based on the building's occupancy the date the survey was done. You can also attest to the number of teleworkers by contacting ARC and providing the project name and ID, the date that best represents the transportation pattern submitted, the reporting period for transportation performance, and the total number of teleworkers. This raises an IT ticket with ARC so that the telecommuters are counted in the performance score. You can always reach out to LEED Coach Canada also, and we'll be happy to assist you. The main challenge for the water and energy performance categories is that the performance scores are sensitive to occupancy fluctuations. Many projects experienced a sudden drop in their scores when the building's occupancy dropped. From what we have seen, most project teams are choosing option 1 and are selecting a reporting period from before the building experienced occupancy changes due to COVID-19. If the data is available, this is probably the easiest option. Remember to use the same reporting periods for energy and water performance. Some projects may not have previous data or may not be significantly impacted by COVID-19 and prefer to use a more recent reporting period. Option 2 allows the project to enter current data from a 1-year time period during COVID-19 and apply a time-weighted occupancy to generate the performance score. This will ensure that ARC accounts for short-term disruptions and bases the score on annual average occupancy. Project teams should keep the building's occupancy up to date in ARC to ensure the weighted occupancy calculation is accurate. The occupancy should be updated anytime there is a significant shift in the building's occupancy patterns, such as a major tenant resuming occupancy. To update the building's occupancy in ARC, go to the Building Settings tab and add a new occupancy date. This can also be uploaded using the ARC data template spreadsheet. Significant occupancy changes have a similar impact on waste performance scores. Some projects have been unable to schedule waste audits, either because of reduced occupancy in the building or changes or delays in services offered by the building's waste hauler. Projects that have previous waste data, such as a waste audit or tracking data from a 1-year period prior to COVID-19, can use option 1. Similar to water and energy, this is probably the easiest option if you have the data available. Projects using option 1 should make sure that the narrative provided clearly indicates the time period that the waste audit represents. Also note that the date and ARC for the waste audit should be the actual date that the audit took place. When you select the Impacted by COVID-19 checkbox in your building settings, reviewers will be alerted that you're using COVID-19 guidance and will adjust the waste performance score if necessary to award the proper number of points. If your project does not have a valid data from a previous time period, option 2 allows for a waste audit to be conducted during reduced occupancy conditions. Project teams using option 2 should follow the ARC submittal guidance carefully to ensure that ARC is calculating the waste performance score based on the actual occupancy at the time of the audit. To indicate that a waste audit is done during reduced occupancy, go to the Building Settings tab in ARC and select Use Occupancy on the date of the audit. The waste data reported needs to align with the occupancy in the building for the time period represented. If this checkbox is not selected, ARC will generate the waste performance score based on the building's weighted occupancy for the 1-year reporting period. This would result in an inflated waste performance score if the building's weighted occupancy is higher than the occupancy on the date the audit was performed. Similarly, the score could appear too low if the weighted occupancy value is higher than the occupancy on the date of the audit. Again, make sure that the building's occupancy is updated regularly to avoid these problems and ensure an accurate score. Similar to the transportation survey, project teams are having trouble conducting the occupant satisfaction survey and achieving the minimum response rate. Option 1 is available for projects that can use survey data from a previous time period. Projects that do not have a previous survey can follow option 2 and conduct the survey on site during reduced occupancy. If the project team is completing the survey during COVID-19, remember that the survey can only include occupants that are on site and can't include occupants working remotely. Responses need to be based on their satisfaction with the building at the time of the survey. For option 2, selecting the Impacted by COVID-19 checkbox under Building Settings will ensure that the response rate is based on the building's occupancy at the time of the audit. Also be sure to include a narrative explaining how many occupants were in the building at the time the survey was completed. As with the other performance categories, option 1 allows projects to use previous data for the indoor air quality evaluation. It seems that accessing previous data might be a problem for many projects because we've had a lot of teams ask about how to complete IAQ testing when the building is unoccupied or partially occupied. The options have been split into 2 scenarios, option 2A for buildings that are partially occupied and option 2B for unoccupied buildings. Option 2A applies to buildings that are partially occupied, so not a vacant building. This option requires testing in the occupied areas that are most representative of the entire project. The first step is to investigate which areas of the building have occupancy to be able to do both TVOC and CO2 testing. The representative area could be one occupied floor or a partial floor that could be used as a representative sample for the rest of the building. The representative areas can have lower occupancy to accommodate physical distancing. Your submission should indicate the level of occupancy in the areas where testing was done to explain how these areas are representative of the project building. If you have concerns about whether or not your chosen test area has enough occupancy to perform CO2 testing, reach out to LEED Coach Canada and we can help. If the building is unoccupied, your team should follow option 2B. The human experience score is made up of 3 components. The occupant satisfaction survey makes up 50%, CO2 is 25%, and TVOC is 25%. If the building is unoccupied, the project will not be able to use CO2 measurements to contribute towards the human experience performance score. The impact on the total human experience score depends on the score achieved by the other 2 components. Option 2B is a great option for unoccupied buildings since it allows the project to still earn credit for TVOC measurements towards the human experience performance score. Again, if you need help, please reach out to LEED Coach Canada. That was a closer look at guidance and solutions for the challenges specific to each performance category. Check out the other video in the series for high-level tips for navigating your project certification. Together, this guidance should provide solutions to any barriers your project might be facing. With the latest guidance, every project can complete annual reporting and submit for certification. We hope this was helpful. For more information, refer to the resources listed. And for any questions or any issues specific to your project that have not been addressed, please reach out to LEED Coach Canada at leadcoach@gbcicanada.ca. Thank you.